As our bruised and scarred economy maybe just maybe struggles to recover, foreclosed houses now checkerboard the land. How many on your street? And there are millions of people who have lost the roof over their heads. A solution to both problems may be squatting, taking over an empty place without permission. A rowdy bunch of squatters in Miami is all but daring the law to come after them. Senior correspondent Maria Hinojosa and producer Dan Logan have our report, part of a series we call Out of the Woods, Rebuilding After the Great Collapse.
Max Rameau knows Miami real estate.
This is a middle-class, working-class neighborhood. We have really nice homes here that were mostly built in the 50s, and adjacent neighborhoods have homes that were built in the 30s and 40s.
He specializes in foreclosed properties, and he has a knack for spotting them wherever he goes.
I'm all the time quickly looking at windows, and so I can identify, while we're in the middle of a conversation, I can identify there's a foreclosed home, there's an empty house.
He can tell you a lot about Miami's different neighborhoods and how they're faring these days, which ones are up and which ones are down. But he's not a real estate agent. He's a radical activist who's challenging the law in order to help the working poor.
If the thing standing between this house sitting vacant and a family living in here is a group of people changing the locks, and I guess we're willing to be that group of people.
Rameau is part of a group called Take Back the Land, which moves homeless families into vacant, foreclosed homes. It's an interesting idea. But here's the catch. Rameau doesn't ask for permission from local authorities or the banks who own the houses. He's promoting illegal squatting.
When people say, well, maybe we understand why you're doing it, but Max, you're breaking all kinds of laws.
Take Back the Land's primary concern is not with what is legal or illegal, but what's moral and immoral. And we think it is immoral to have vacant homes on one side of the street and homeless people with nowhere to live on the other side of the street.
There are plenty of vacant homes to be had in Miami-Dade County. Hundreds of houses lie empty in what has become ground zero of the nation's foreclosure crisis. Rameau acknowledges that squatting in those homes is completely illegal. But in 2009, he says, it's also completely necessary.
When you have an extreme crisis, the response to that crisis is going to be extreme. And right now we have an extreme crisis, and people really don't have any other options.
As the Great Recession continues to take its toll, a startling number of Americans are facing the prospect of homelessness. Normally, around 3 million Americans will go through homelessness in a given year. But that number will rise to around 4 million as a result of the economic downturn, experts predict. Many of those newly homeless will be working class and even middle class families. Around the country, families who can't afford rent are living in all kinds of places. Tiny, cramped motel rooms, parked cars and vans, and makeshift tent settlements. In Miami, Rameau would like to turn the foreclosure crisis into an opportunity to help the homeless.
We've got a bunch of empty houses and a bunch of people who don't know where they're going to sleep tonight. And we've got the banks who have already been paid billions and billions of dollars for these houses. So what is the society going to do with those houses?
Besides housing families, Rameau also wants to make a statement. His home takeovers are acts of civil disobedience, protesting the government's financial bailout, which allowed the banks to keep ownership of thousands of livable foreclosed homes.
The deal, at least as we were sold in the public, was that the federal government was going to give billions of dollars to banks in exchange for their toxic assets for these homes. Here, what actually ended up happening, in spite of the sales pitch, was that the banks got billions of dollars and they got to keep the homes. Now, you can't both get the billions of dollars and get to keep the homes.
Rameau is, in effect, wresting those homes back from the banks. He actually calls it liberating a home.
Some people are going to say, Max, that sounds really revolutionary. You're liberating a home and putting a homeless family there.
Well, we think it's really humane, and we think that we're serving a humane purpose by doing that. We think that liberating a home is certainly preferable to making room under a bridge.
For over a year, Take Back the Land has moved dozens of homeless people into abandoned houses mostly in secret, giving them a roof over their heads while at the same time putting them at risk for criminal prosecution. Rameau and his team put themselves at risk when they look for potential homes, testing local trespassing laws.
We look at the homes, go inside them quite often, and just see what kind of condition they're in. We take
How do you
notes
get inside the
on
homes?
A shocking number of the homes are completely and totally unsecured. So the back doors are open, windows are open, sometimes front doors are open. But also then try to get a look inside.
We followed Rameau as he scouted a home in the Little Haiti section of Miami. He walked onto the abandoned property in broad daylight, like he owned the place.
You know, are you worried about what people are thinking about what you're doing here?
Well, this is a foreclosed home, and foreclosed homes are for sale. And people, in order to assess whether or not they want to purchase them, have to come and look at the homes. And we're doing the same kind of assessment.
In the case of this house, the doors were locked, and he couldn't get inside. So Rameau looked for other clues around the property that would indicate how long the foreclosed home had been vacant. Take Back the Land chooses its homes carefully so that squatters will be less likely to get caught.
The grass in the backyard here is up to my chest, so my sense is that there's not someone here all the time. There's definitely not someone here every week or every month looking at the place.
Rameau also made sure that the house still had functioning utilities, so it's livable for a family. He's found that utility companies will turn on the electricity in a home as long as they're getting paid, no matter who's cutting the check.
And the things that I'll be looking for inside will be for wall sockets that have been taken out, electrical sockets, to see if there's any electricity running through the house.
All in all, this house was not a bad find.
It looks like it's in pretty good shape.
It looks like it's in very good condition.
Take Back the Land also tracks a home's ownership status on the web, searching county records and the bank's listings. And they'll come back and check a house at least 2 more times after their first visit.
If nothing has changed, no one's here, then we decided that it was not active, we'd make the move and try to get a family.
That's when things start to get interesting. On move-in day, when a homeless family breaks into a house that isn't theirs, Take Back the Land must be prepared for any response from the bank that owns the home.
When they realize that there's a family squatting, what have they done?
Well, in a number of instances, of course, they don't realize it. We're moving the families in quietly. We've had families in these homes for 6 months, 3 months, 4 months, 9 and 10 months. And we've had one house, which we've had control over, 2 separate families in the same house over the course of 18 months.
Some of the banks eventually catch on and tell the families they must get out. But at that point, many of the families are ready to leave.
They've been there for several months, they've saved money, and they're ready to move on to an apartment or move on to wherever they're.
So you actually have families that buy squatting for 3 or 4 months?
Save money and are ready to go to, in most instances they go to other cities, but.
So they're essentially able to jumpstart their lives.
They're able to do the things that they were not able to do before.
While some families move on, other families want to stay in a home no matter what. So Take Back the Land will use publicity and the media to pressure the bank from kicking them out of a house. Case in point, the Trody family. Mary Trody and several members of her extended family had all been living under one roof after a number of them lost their jobs. This past February, they were evicted from their home after they couldn't afford to pay the mortgage. After they were thrown out on a Friday, they spent the weekend sleeping in a van parked in a nearby supermarket parking lot. They went to Max Rameau for help, and that Monday, he led them back into their house. The takeover caused quite a ruckus and even made the local news.
This is my home. I'm here to take back my home.
The chances of a bank or anyone else selling this house in this market are 0. There's no chance it's going to be sold, which means you're going to have an empty house sitting on the street while you have 12 human beings living on the street, living in a van.
A man from the property agency arrived, and so did the police. But with cameras rolling, they backed off and left without making any arrests. Rameau says that's a surprisingly common reaction.
We've had property managers who've come and they've called the police and the property managers have left. We've called banks ourselves and told them, we have a family who's staying there, they're living there, they want to talk to you about staying there and even paying you rent, and we can't get return calls back from the banks.